And with that, I'm going to introduce our day chair, Jim Nelson, who really doesn't need any introduction at all. He is legendary as, okay, come on up.
The legend continues. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Kylie Cooper this morning. Kylie joined Rise Early Training Center in March of 2023, and I'm not going to say much about that because that's her talk. So I'm going to let her talk about that a little bit. She comes with a long experience in early childhood education. She has a master's degree in early childhood education. She's worked for a number of organizations and as well as trade groups in that area. She is a member of the St. Louis Park Sunrise Rotary Club as of earlier this year, approximately when she joined her organization that she's going to talk about. And she lives in St. Louis. Not in St. Louis Park. She's a member of St. Louis Park Rotary, but she lives in Golden Valley with her husband, who is an engineer dealing with all things water. We should get him down to Honduras maybe one of these days. She has a 2-year-old at home, so she's busy, not busy enough, fortunately, to come and visit us this morning. And I guess to go to her Rotary meeting in the morning as well. She grew up in Milwaukee, and she likes the outdoors. She and her husband do a lot of outdoor hiking and so forth. So please welcome Kylie Cooper. Kylie.
Well, thank you all for having me. I am honored to be able to talk about my second favorite topic, Rise Early Learning Center, second, of course, to my 2-year-old, and I'm sure we'll work her into this. I'm pretty good at that. I will also say, I didn't realize it was your birthday yesterday, Jim, so happy birthday. At my Rotary Club, we have a rule that if you want people to sing to you, you pay $1 happy buck. And if you don't want the group to sing to you, you pay $5 and we still sing to you. So it's interesting to see that there's a different tradition here. But Rise Early Learning Center is an innovative program that has been a dream for many years now, and grew out of a community assessment in St. Louis Park, and really looked at what issues face our communities the most, what needs to be changed, how do we implement change on a small scale to create a template for larger scale change. So Rise Early Learning Center is a portion of a partnership that is coming into place. I will also say with the Hard Hat Tour coming up, the Rotary Club's Tuesday Hard Hat Tour will be our last Hard Hat Tour because we will no longer need hard hats after that. So we've brought a lot of people through and I've worn a lot of hard hats this summer. So I will be excited to welcome you all there. So I joined Rise Early in March of 2023. And I was really drawn to it for a lot of reasons, but mostly that I'm an early childhood person. And I very firmly believe that a lot of the challenges that we see in society can be helped by really strong, high quality, accessible early childhood education. And this was the first project I've seen in my career that looked at every single issue that faces this, that young families encounter, and said, let's try to take all of these on. So I'm excited to talk to you about some of this today. Please feel free to interrupt me with questions. I'm happy to go off script at any point too. So I alluded to this, and I'm going to guess that Jim has probably told you some of this at some point, that in 2018, Westwood Lutheran Church, which is based in St. Louis Park, held a series of community talks and kind of a community assessment process asking various community leaders what those biggest issues in St. Louis Park were at the time. This is before the pandemic, but to no one's surprise, really, over and over again, the refrain that came up was that families need affordable housing and families need access to affordable childcare. Now, on the other side of the pandemic, you really can't crack open an article about early childhood without knowing that this is a glaring issue, a glaring challenge. We're lucky to be in Minnesota where there's some policies in place that are helping the field. But families are still really struggling in that aspect. The difference between, any community in the world could probably say their biggest challenges are those two areas and those access, was that this group decided we're going to move the needle on this. And so they ended up finding a plot of land that was going up for sale that was actually owned by the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in St. Louis Park. And they, through a partnership with CommonBond Communities, who some of you might be familiar with, opted to sell that land to CommonBond Communities at a pretty significant discount, knowing that the intention of the space would be really carrying out the mission of serving the community on a long-term basis. There are a lot of different ways to do affordable housing. And one thing that CommonBond commits to is that those units that are affordable stay affordable. They don't change after 10 years. They don't change after any point. The other thing that's really unique about this building, it's called Rise on 7, is that these units, there's 120 units in it, and they're all 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So it is really, really difficult for families to find family-focused housing at any point. Really anywhere in the country, it's hard to find, especially 3-bedroom apartments. A lot easier to find studio apartments that are affordable. And that obviously creates a big barrier for families. So this building will have 120 of those units. Half of them are 1 bedrooms and the other half are 2 and 3 bedroom units. We realize, we've always known that this is a need, but over the summer, the interest list for those 120 apartments grew to 1,500 or 1,600. And the property management team at the time said, this is the biggest list that we've ever had to deal with. So we've got to change some processes. They sent out an email blast and a text blast to everybody on the interest list. And within a couple of hours, they had over 500 people affirming that they still wanted to be considered for space. So right now that group is working through their wait list. We'll have about 50% occupancy in the building by the end of the calendar year and 100% occupancy, I believe, by the end of February. Our center is co-located, so we're on the ground floor of that building. We'll have 62 slots in there. I have this on a slide. Well, we'll get to that. 62 slots for childcare in that building. Half of those are heavily subsidized. So the average cost of high quality childcare in the West Metro is north of $20,000 per year. So some of you might have family members in college and tuition checks and things like that going. It's not that different for infants and toddlers. We also know that it's one of the best investments that we can make in young minds. Those first 5 years, 80% of brain development happens in that period of time. But that is a lot of money if you're looking at $100,000 before a child goes into kindergarten for childcare. So we knew from the very beginning that one of the problems that Rise really wanted to solve was this access and affordability piece. And Westwood Lutheran Church said, we're going to put in some money and we're going to inspire others to give as well. And so that initial kind of catalyst donation and that commitment from Westwood Lutheran Church was about $1.4 million over a 10-year period of time. We've figured out that it will cost us about $4.1 million over that 10-year period to run this safely, to make sure that families can continue to have access to it and that our teachers are paid well. And I'll get into that a little bit. So I mentioned news articles about early childhood. Some of you may have seen all sorts of different things, especially in the last 3 years, about this workforce challenge that we're facing. It is really impossible to hire early childhood educators. The average hourly rate for early childhood educators in Minnesota is $13.31 per hour. So far from a livable wage, and far from pay parity as well. So our board from the very beginning said, if we're going to do this, we're going to commit to having pay parity with the public school system. So our teachers will make the same amount of money as somebody with similar qualifications at the St. Louis Park public school system. And we watch that pretty closely. When I first came into this job, and had you asked me what keeps me awake at night, what's going to be the biggest challenge, it was hiring staff. And as of last night, we have 7 of our 8 lead teachers hired, and we have 3 of our 4 assistant teachers hired. And we still have about a month before our deadline for that comes up. We have had over 100 applicants for our lead teacher positions, which is a huge testament to kind of what we felt maybe was a gamble in some senses, that, you know, I feel my background is a toddler teacher for 7 years. I left for pay reasons and moved into different areas of the early childhood field. I had said for a long time, if I could find a teaching job that would pay me what I earn in whatever role, I would go back in a heartbeat. And so we gambled a little bit and we said, let's see if we can get some other teachers who are also willing to do that. And it has turned out to be a massive affirmation of that. So we know offering higher pay gets those staff in the door. We know caring for them longer term is going to keep them there and providing a system that is providing for the kids as well. The other piece was access for families. So I mentioned half of we'll have 62 slots. Half of those are heavily subsidized. We utilize the state funding streams like the childcare assistance program, which had a big increase this year that was about 13 years overdue, but brought us up to a reasonable reimbursement for children who are able to access childcare assistance programs. We also are able to use Minnesota Early Learning Scholarships, but the staff knew and the program knew that there are a lot of families who fall outside of the range of eligibility for that. And it's a long time before you're able to comfortably afford what the market rate for early childhood and childcare is. And so we have a third funding stream, which really sets us apart of a lot of programs to say we will support a family. They will pay no more than 30% of the market rate, which breaks down to about 7% of their overall income for childcare in a year. So a family who is accessing those subsidies through Rise Early will pay about $6,000 to $7,000 per year for their childcare versus 20 to 22. So that's a huge, huge help for a working family. We also know that this coordination between housing stability and our family support system is really critical. We can only manage the learning that happens inside of the classroom, and there's a lot of other factors that need to be in place for families to thrive. We need housing stability, we need food stability, we need gainful employment that's stable. And so we also have partnered with Way to Grow Minneapolis, which is an outstanding program based here. It's expanding into St. Louis Park, kind of using this program as the conduit for that. They recently expanded into Brooklyn Park as well. They provide intensive home visiting, and they have had results that are kind of mind-blowing. They helped families early in the prenatal stages. They've been able to have 100% of their kids, I think in 2022, they had no low birth weight. They had no children born addicted. Their teen pregnancies, they had no repeat teen pregnancies. And so this intensive model of supporting families and making sure that they have access to what they need and that they can drive what they need and name that for themselves has been really impactful. And we're excited to be able to coordinate that with what's happening in the classroom. This is just a visual of our theory of change and kind of the main model of this partnership between CommonBond, Way to Grow, and Rise Early. I said 50% of our families will be accessing subsidies. The other 50% are private pay. The reason for that is not just budgetary. It's that research actually shows us that mixed delivery models and universal delivery models have a higher return on investment for children long-term. So programs, I think years ago, the logic still is that public dollars and investment dollars should be directed to the families and the children who are the most in need. That's still the case, but I think that gets interpreted sometimes as a program should only be serving children who are high needs, which is a noble pursuit. But in practice, what ends up happening is a lot of teacher burnout, a lot of high stress in classrooms because you have a lot of different factors that kids are processing things, a lot of high risk situations going on in the classroom. So being able to have more of a mixed delivery and universal delivery model is actually better long-term for the entirety of the group. the children who are more affluent in the class actually have better outcomes as well, long-term. Those families too will have access to the Way to Grow services. There's no restrictions on who has access to that. And that's also something I'm excited about. I think if I had a home visitor in my life, that would make things a little bit easier sometimes with Louise. There it is. I worked her in. But there are a lot of different factors that go into running this program. And there are similar programs. There's no program that matches what we're doing. What sets us apart from many programs is that we're not trying to do all three of these factors of the partnership at the same time. It lets us really be three expert organizations really driving and succeeding in the areas that we're championing. So I will never have to worry about whether or not somebody has paid rent. And likewise, CommonBond will not be checking in to know who has what attendance or things like that going on. And we'll be able to coordinate services to be supportive and to help families as they run into barriers and challenges. So I mentioned these are our foundational partnerships. We also have kind of what we refer to as lowercase p partnerships, looking at different struggles or challenges that families might encounter, or just general routine things that we can support. So we'll have things like a lending library on site. We'll have a resource shelf on site that will have food, diapers, formula, wipes, whatever families need kind of on their way out at the end of the day. They can grab off the shelf. They have full access to it. There's no barrier to entry for that. We're looking at dental care partnerships. So bringing dental days on site where this group will bring their whole dental chair setup on site for us. And I'll show you the room if you come out next week for where that's going to be. But being able to attach, we know child outcomes are directly linked to oral health care, similarly with nutrition, similarly with all of these stability pieces, and that's a huge help for families too, to not have to leave work in the middle of the day, figure out transportation, find your dental home, all of those pieces that kind of line up. The other benefit that this model has in a system like that is kids see their peers going through it and they're not absorbing their own parents' anxiety about going to the dentist, which a lot of us just give without meaning to. And so I think there's a lot of potential for bringing in different organizations and continuing to connect families to what they need and really being a hub for resources. One of the challenges over the last 6 months and really prior to that is that we have no idea who we're going to serve. We don't know. Well, now we are starting to know who's going to be in the building. And actually last week we started accepting our first families, which really made this become real to me. Getting to know the demographics of who's moving into the building, knowing that this was one of the first programs that CommonBond was going to be operating that has this big intentional family focus, that we're still kind of waiting to see what the actual demographic breakdown is. I can say that the average annual income for a CommonBond household is $19,000 per year. We also know that the average stay for a CommonBond resident is about 6 years. And both of those are indicators that we're going to be watching really closely to see what the impacts beyond the child's success are. When somebody is in a CommonBond apartment, they don't, you don't get kicked out when you start to thrive. You stay there until you choose to leave. You're eligible at the beginning and then you submit information annually, but you don't hit a certain threshold and then have to leave the building. So we're watching closely to see how much longer our families end up staying in the building because they've cultivated a really strong community and a village of support that they might not have otherwise had access to. We're also really curious to see what year-over-year income ends up being, because of course, one of the biggest factors for young families in being able to work full-time is access to childcare and reliable childcare, or the ability, kids get sick. Maybe you have a neighbor who they can shift their schedule, you can partner with each other, and getting to know how we can support holistically. Those will both be indicators that we're going to watch very closely. We follow a really intentional but self-designed curriculum program. It is Reggio inspired. So if you're familiar with that, what I mean by that is we follow the child's interests and the child's needs. Our program in doing that is also anti-racist intentionally. We put in a lot of effort into making sure families feel included and invited to be their full authentic selves, that we are preparing children to be full citizens when they move on from Rise Early. It is trauma informed. A lot of that happened in our physical design, and it will continue to be reinforced through our instructional design for children. But little details like what nooks and crannies are available in the buildings, how can we dim lights when they need to be, things that are intentional to make sure kids aren't overstimulated at any point and they're able to, their brains aren't dumping cortisol when they don't need to, so that they can be ready to learn and relax. We have a whole family approach. All early childhood programs in this state are required to have an open door policy, but we've really built that into our actual curriculum to make sure it's not just that we've opened the doors and left them available, that we're actually inviting families in to be a part of what we do in our classrooms, how they bring in their own gifts to share with the other kids, how they celebrate things that they do, and can talk about different traditions that are, or that they might do at home as well. And then that coordinated services model, being able to be a hub for resources, not necessarily the place with all of the answers. Each of our teachers is a champion of a different community partner. So they would not necessarily be the only person to talk to, but what that allows us to do is when a family is struggling, we can say, oh, hey, you know, so-and-so works with this organization. Why don't you go talk to them? They could give you some information. They can tell you who to talk to. And just that ability to have a warm handoff to other social services is really big. It kind of makes that social safety net an actual net in that case, and families can feel fully supported and taken care of. We open our doors to families in January, on January 2nd. So we're getting really close. We've got our staff starting on November 15th. I already talked about our license capacity. We'll have children from 6 weeks to kindergarten. And our eligibility is based on Rise on 7 families. The whole purpose for the partnership is prioritizing the families in that building for need. But certainly it will be open as well to the whole community. And we're, like I said, as we're starting to accept families who have been leasing up in the building and accepting families who are in the community, it's fun to start seeing the classroom rosters come together. A big piece of this is outcomes and metrics. So all of this is good, but if we don't hold ourselves accountable to that and we're not actually able to say this actually does help with kindergarten readiness and beyond, it doesn't really matter. So we will be watching on a quarterly basis for child outcomes metrics. We want to make sure children are continuing to meet various milestones so that if there's a need for intervention, we can connect families with the local school district or other organizations that support intervention processes. We will also be looking at long-term outcomes. We've partnered with St. Louis Park Public Schools to flag children as they go into that system so we can continue to access how those children are doing long-term. And we've engaged, we've been in talks with Child Trends to help us with a longitudinal study to be able to prove this. Research is pretty clear that our model will be successful, but we want to make sure that we're holding ourselves to that. And as things need to change, that we can be really responsive and make that on a database decision. I come from Head Start most recently, so all I do is data most of the time. So this is a language I'm familiar with. And I think being able to prove that what we're doing is helpful is really important and very helpful to our overall goal of really being a template for what really well done early childhood education can look like. Here's just a couple shots. This is way in the past now from what the building looks like. We've got like paint on the walls and stuff now. So, but it's been fun to see this project come to life, and little factors of what details have gone in. As of yesterday, this was early days. And as of yesterday, the fence for the space has been pulled down and landscaping went in. So it's really close to opening. We expect to have families there in about a month moving in. So it's about 5 years from beginning to end here, beginning to opening, beginning to beginning. Yeah. So yeah, so that is Rise Early. And if you are interested in coming out for the Hard Hat Tour and learning a little bit more about our approach, you're absolutely welcome to on Tuesday. I think connect with Jim directly if you are planning to do so, so I can make sure I've got a hat ready for you. Yeah. And it's 8:29.
We have time for one or two questions.
8:29, right? Or am I wrong?
Yep. Kylie, thanks for your presentation. I guess I don't have to explain to you what Way to Grow is, but we have the speaker gift. We donate, we've had a relationship with Way to Grow for a long time, and we donate a book for a third grader in honor of the speaker. And we ask you to sign the book with this pen that has your name on it, actually. So that's a kind of a theft preventative. So if you would sign that, and we'll donate that to Way to Grow in your honor, and you keep the pen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's have another round of applause.
And for time's sake, I'm going to draw 2 names for people that get the honey. Oh, I have 2 slips here. Slip 1 is Todd Marshall. Congratulations. And Kelly. So you can come up and get your honey at the end of the meeting. Congratulations. And I just want to thank everybody that was part of our success, or we'll call it a success today. Our greeter, Gary, Reflection, Rob, Happy Box, the Iowa, Minnesota team, and Jim Nelson for daycare, Steve for administrator. What? What'd I say? Thank you. Anna and Bill. Okay. And Greg and Brock and our guests. Thanks so much for coming. We'd love to have you come back. And with that, have a great Rotary week. Off-site next week. Do you come here? No. We go to meet Minneapolis. I'll see you then.